Good morning. Get ready. Fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be a fascinating edition of my live stream. Those of you who've been watching it now, I've been doing it for just about over a year now. I have never, ever had a guest on the show. It's always been me and you and us talking about this. I do the Tangent podcast with Al and Jonesy, but that's separate from what I'm doing here. But I've never had a guest. You know, you watch my television show at night, we have guests on all the time, bringing their areas of expertise to the table. But this is going to be special. And that's because of the guests that I've invited on. And obviously, we're going to be talking about evil today. We're going to be talking about the Idaho 4 monster, I think is the best way for me to refer to him, and try to get inside his mind, get a better understanding. And for those of you who watch my television programs at night, Closing Arguments at 8 or Vinnie Politan Investigates at 9, I have some regulars that come in, but there's one that every time I'm talking about an issue like this, and I want to get inside the mind of someone who has allegedly, or actually, like in this case, we don't have to say allegedly anymore, committed these atrocities. There's one person is on the top of my list that I want on the show. And whenever we can get him, we're very thankful. And I'm really thankful that we're going to have him on today. He's a forensic psychologist. He's on the, the list goes on and on. Here we go. He's on the, he's a forensic expert, obviously, forensic psychology, on the expert panel for the Cold Case Foundation. But he's brilliant. And I know you've seen him, whether he's live streaming or on television, or you may have read his book, The New Evil. Dr. Gary Brucato is going to join us. And let me bring him in right now. Again, there he is. Oh, wait, I got to make you the same size as me. Here we go. All right. Dr. Gary Brucato, great to have you here. And let me bring in, wait, where is it? See, I do this all myself, Doc. So here it is, The New Evil. That's the book. So, first of all, thank you for doing this today. I appreciate it. And I think what we'll have an opportunity to do today that we're sort of hamstrung by the limitations of television is the level of depth and where we can go with this conversation. So thanks so much for doing this. How are you doing today?
Very well. A little hot here in New York, but other than that, just fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm glad. I've never had a guest on, so this is, I'll stumble through it a little bit, but when I do the television show, we've got a big staff that helps us get through everything. Here, it's just me, and obviously we have our great mod squad that'll help us out in the chat. But I know folks are excited to hear from you today. Here's the first question I had for you about this monster from the Idaho 4. Now that we've learned a little bit more about him, is there anything that has really taken you by surprise that you've learned about this man that has come out? Because I know early on you had a profile. It was pretty spot on, to be honest. But is there any of these little details or things that you've learned that have surprised you about the man who went in court and admitted to this?
Well, the profile you're talking about was one I did with other members of the Cold Case Foundation on a program called Interview Room, which is like the podcast for the foundation, basically. And so we had there Ann Burgess, who's my research partner at Boston College, where I'm a visiting scholar. Greg Cooper, who was the former head of behavioral science for the FBI after John Douglas departed. Dean Jackson, who was the deputy director of the foundation, and Chris McDonough, who's a homicide detective who's often on court TV.
Yeah, on my show all the time.
And in that profile, one of the things we, among the many things we said was that it was very clear that whoever this was somebody who was studying crime. And whenever we're looking at these kinds of people, we're always interested to know, who do they emulate? Who is their favorite offender? Who are they impersonating? So one of the surprises for me was that based upon the Dateline information and some clues that we had even before that stuff came out, some people may have seen me on a couple of Dateline episodes about Kohberger. was to discover his preoccupation with Ted Bundy. The preoccupation with Ted Bundy is extremely important because it starts to make sense out of a lot of psychology of this guy, the particular pornography he seemed to be looking at, which is conspicuously similar to the kinds of things that interested Bundy. And it starts to give us a clue about why he might have targeted a sorority-style house, the way that Bundy did, for example. The idea of going in the middle of the night, possibly bludgeoning somebody before attacking them, or intending to, the way that Bundy did, so that you're sort of blitzing them before you do whatever you're going to do to them, the way he was dressed, etc. And I'm sure we're going to discover there were a few offenders that he emulated, because these guys all do. But I think it tells us a great deal about his psychology, that that's the particular guy that he was drawn to. I had been suspicious about Bundy because when he gave the alibi as Wawawee, the park out Wawawee, Wawawee was the site of the discovery of a body that was attributed to Bundy in the 70s. If he had pled guilty to it, it would have been his first murder, his first canonical murder. But they asked him about it on the day of his execution, and he denied it. He wouldn't admit that he had anything to do with it. Of course, in that woman's case, a person who looked conspicuously like Bundy was seen around her with a VW Bug. So, you know, you use your imagination if he might have been implicated. But that's very interesting to me. And so when I realized that Wawawee was the place being used as an alibi, and paired that with the sorority style, you know, home, you know, reminding me of Chi Omega, I started suspecting Bundy as the inspiration. And then sure enough, when the Dateline episode came out, it turns out he was all over Kohberger's phone. Kohberger was downloading all kinds of stuff related to Bundy, cosplaying as Bundy. And I think it becomes clear that he loomed large in this guy's motives and psychology.
Do you think that's why he moved out to that part of the country for his degree? That doesn't seem like it could. I mean, it could be a coincidence, but do you think it is?
Well, he was at a different university, but same state. But like, for example, that woman that went missing, Joy Page, that they found in Wawawee in the 70s, she was from Pullman. I mean, you know, it starts to get kind of interesting, the coincidences and the idea that it almost seems to look like some kind of emulating of this guy. It could be a complete coincidence. It's just, you know, there's a good forensic program out there. You know, he was being advised on best places to go. So we don't know, but it's intriguing to add to the list of Bundy-ish facts in this case.
So I want to ask you a chicken egg question here.
Hmm?
Does he study this because he wants to commit the crime, or does he commit the crime because he's been studying this, and in his mind, this is the best way to study it, by jumping into the body of someone committing these crimes?
This is one of the most crucial questions that I would want to get to if I wind up interviewing him in any way, and I suspect that our paths will cross at some point in the future. This will be my answer. My sense is that the appeal of Bundy for this guy was that Bundy was the classic offender who led a double life, who had a family that would not have really suspected him, thought he was entering into some kind of pro-social existence, but by night was living this horrendous secret existence that he sort of felt like he was battling and yet giving into, because with alcohol, substances, all that. And I think Kohberger identified with that, is particularly because in both cases there's an important role of getting sucked in with violent pornography that I think was starting to feel to this guy like, if I showed this to anybody, I'd have to be ashamed. You know, people would know that I harbor these misogynistic ideas. I'm very angry, etc. So he knew to hide it. Which is interesting because he's got that autism diagnosis, but he's very, very good at reading what he should not show in terms of his criminality to people, right? He did not hide his nastiness, but he was very good at, I mean, he was able to deceive even experts in his program at DeSales, so that he didn't have these red flags, right? I mean, so that's a little interesting when you think about somebody who has been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. Looks a lot more like you'd see in a psychopath. Although I leave that up to to other experts who meet with him to decide and tease apart. I mean, I'm not going to question the autism diagnosis, but I think that what you had was a person who, at least for a little while, was sort of confused about his identity and where he was going to go with his life, and am I going to go out the front door or the back, in terms of I can be a helper or I can be a villain. And what happens with a lot of these people is you have a certain kind of brain. You're odd and kind of fearless and sensation seeking and angry and paranoid and all of that. But if the world is good to you, you might channel that into something pro-social. You might be the kind of person who, could throw himself on a grenade and save the platoon because you're fearless, right? Or something like that. But instead, you go the other direction because you're furious. And so what I think is there's a little bit of battling these inner demons and getting interested in crime and wanting to know if other offenders feel the kind of emptiness he does. I thought it was very interesting that in his survey, he's asking about depression. That's a point that was made by Dr. Victor Petreka, one of my colleagues at Boston College. Very interesting point. Psychopathic people don't tend to be depressed. And here he is asking people about depression. Well, that makes me wonder about the void, the emptiness this guy was feeling, the isolation. And what I think is that at some point, he started feeling the power that comes with condescending to people, dominating them, controlling them. And we start to see, and this is where I don't really like the incel theory, because there were women interested in this guy. He just was strange to them, right? So he goes on a date and tells a woman that he wants to tickle her because he can't do anything with her, probably, right? He's inadequate, probably. So he wants to tickle her. So here we already see a kind of control mechanism. Tells her she has nice birthing hips. So here we see the division of women into, useful, homebound, barefoot and pregnant idea of women versus the totally misogynistic stuff he's got in the pornography, right? So you start seeing that fragmentation of women in his mind, the nastiness increases, and basically, as his life is collapsing, he blames them. But he blames women for getting him in trouble with the TA position. They're rejecting him left, right, and center. There's a girl who likes him, a woman who likes him at school. He has no interest in her. The Korean exchange student basically is accused of robbing her and setting up a camera to help her figure out who the crook is, which he's almost certainly watching himself. So that you start seeing that classic descent. And I think by the time you get to November, you have to remember he had a knife for months and months and months on Amazon. So the fantasy is brewing, and he's just waiting for something to justify going out and using it, finding a target and saying, it's time, it's D-Day, I'm going in. And so the most important point here is, yeah, he's studying it. He's sort of battling it probably a little bit. He's getting better at it. He's looking confused about which way he wants to go. And then circumstances, I think, push him in the dark direction. And what you wind up with is somebody who looks an awful lot like a serial killer with the behavior.
Do you think this is the first? Do you believe this is his first attempt?
Yes. In the when I was at Columbia, I used to be the assistant director of the early psychosis clinic, and when I was there, we did the Columbia Mass Murder Database. That's the largest study ever done of mass murder worldwide. We looked at 119 years of mass murder, and one of the things we learned is that 11.78% of people who commit mass murder, like Kohberger, go on to commit serial killing or have previously killed. And BTK, a good example of that, right? So he goes in there and he winds up killing the whole Otero family, right? Almost the whole family. So that you have a mass murder in a person who's basically a serial killer. I think that's what you had with Kohberger. And the reason is mass murderers motivationally are very different. They're rarely sexually motivated in any way or fantasy motivated. Basically, they're people who have poor coping skills in the face of difficult life events. Their whole identity centers around a thing. They lose that thing, they become ballistic, sometimes literally if it's a mass shooting. They go ballistic, and what you wind up with is the type that scheme and plot psychopathically, like in 2 weeks I'm going to kill people, in the public square, or the type that more impulsively does it. But it's usually about that kind of thing. When you start seeing somebody looking at violent pornography of drugged and sleeping women and stalking their house multiple times and obsessing over Ted Bundy and cosplaying as him and having a weapon before you even have a reason to be upset, you think serial killer. And what I think is that if this guy had not been incarcerated, he would have proceeded to do it again and probably done it better. I don't think he intended to kill 4 people. I think he went in there to target one, probably sexually assault her, and everything went badly.
Oh, really? So you think he wanted to attack her in that way as well?
Oh, yes. I think that he went in probably in imitation of Bundy. The idea was probably to go in the middle of the night and bludgeon or blitz the person who's asleep, and either take her out, possibly to that park, or leave her there, and to engage in some sort of sexualized fantasy. And because he was completely inadequate and weird, the person didn't even need to be awake. Remember, his pornography choices: sleeping women, drugged women. Remember that Bundy was into necrophilia. So that the idea is you have this person who's just sort of laying there like a marionette, and you're doing whatever you want to do. So they don't have to be conscious. And in the darkness, you can't see what a loser he is, right? He could be whatever he wants in the dark. He's got a mask. It's pitch dark, so he's hiding in that darkness like a costume. And what I think winds up happening is he gets in there, and Kaylee's there, and he's furious at her. That's why you have the extreme violence against her. She interrupts this thing, and then Xana comes in the middle of it, and he has to kill her. And then he's especially angry that there's a male there, because a male was not expected in the fantasy. So the male gets that kind of special treatment of the cutting of the hamstrings, because it's how dare you be in my sexualized fantasy. And so I think that was the intention.
How about the choosing of the victim? Do you think there was a lot of thought that went into that? Do you think that there was some sort of potential actual interaction, or just a stalking, whether it's in person or on social media?
Well, when you start to understand that this guy operated like a serial offender, what you realize is that first you have what I've called in the literature, I called the prototype, because there was no word for that phenomenon, right? Where you have an image in your mind of what you're looking for. So think of like a playwright or a screenwriter who imagines a character, or a novelist. You imagine a character, and then you go out and you have to look for the person to cast in the fantasy, right? Like casting agent. So we could tell from the women that are on his phone that were all these sort of sorority style, attractive young women, basically mostly blondes and bikinis, that kind of thing. He has a prototype that's basically like the young stereotyped woman, right? That seems to represent this group rejecting him. I'm dying to see what his mom looks like. I've always thought that was interesting. Even his professor is a petite blonde. I was always interested if he had a thing for that type. But the idea is he has that prototype, and then we know that he's trolling, right? And there's a kind of interchangeableness to these women. At some point, he hones in on that house. It looks like somewhere around August, and then there are many trips there, over and over and over and over again, right? So I think what happened is he opportunistically came across somebody who met the prototype criteria, and then fixated, this is the one. But if that had not worked out, there would have been others. And that's very conspicuously like the Bundy story, right? Where, now, I'll give you a simple example. Bundy, when he was at Lake Sam, the famous story of him where he goes to the park and he picks up 2 victims on the same day, Naslund and Ott, right? Kills them. Well, there was a recreation of what he did that day based on police reports that shows that he actually stood by the bathroom and he asked different women to help him out with the sailboat, to put on top of the car every 15 minutes. Meaning that lots of women said no to him. He just got 2 that said yes. So there was no honing in on a highly, they just had to look the part. But there were a lot of them who did. He just needed to catch a couple, right? Well, it's a little bit like that. So I think that my sense is that it was Maddie that he had the focus on. And you know, when we understand that, it starts to make sense that he makes a beeline right up to her room, you know, even in the dark of the house and everything, he knows just where to go. And you can bet that on those trips to that house, he was sitting out there watching through the windows, probably, almost certainly masturbating, and doing a kind of surveillance. He would have used, probably based on other offenders, he probably would have been using like TikTok videos and things as a kind of intel, because on the videos you could see things like where the windows are, where the furniture is, where the doors are, is there a pet, how many people live there, etc. Would have been looking through the windows. But also remember something, this guy was a drug addict. He had a history of thievery, including from his own sister. We know from talking to these kinds of offenders that a lot of them start out as burglars. They're very, very good at inveigling themselves into people's houses in the middle of the night and taking stuff. And we in the foundation have been suspicious from the get-go that this guy somehow was in that house at some point. Now, some of these offenders will even watch you in your sleep. Richard Ramirez. Oh, yes. Richard Ramirez, for example, the Night Stalker, would stand in the doorway of your bedroom and watch you sleeping, rob the house, move around, go in the refrigerator, do whatever he wanted, and leave. Come back a few days later, maybe. But the idea was this power that you experienced walking around the house, looking at things, taking things. And when this story fully emerges, I strongly suspect you're going to discover that as part of this guy's kind of criminal versatility, he was probably a very adept crook who got into houses and took stuff.
So does that go into the equation on choosing a victim, the physical access to where they're living? And in this house, it seemed like, you know, people were able to come in and out pretty regularly, pretty easily.
Yes, and you hit the nail on the head, because this is the classic situation where fantasy and the needs of fantasy cross over into the pragmatic. Because it is one thing to desire a particular target, is another to need a target that you can actually access. And so with a lot of these offenders, it's all things like, oh, they had a door with a glass window I could easily break. You know, I was able to get in there and twist the lock a little bit. Remember, for example, early in this case, everybody seems to have forgotten that there was an issue where one of the victim's parents was asked to come and fix a lock that wasn't working. Remember that story? Okay.
Yes.
Well, that jumped out at us in the foundation from day one, because it's a classic technique. You break into the house, you bust the lock, you come back a few days later, right? So that kind of thing. So we were very suspicious that there was some time spent either physically or virtually in that home, because he knew exactly where he was going in the middle of the night, right? Just shot right up there. But now the question is, why did his intel fail him so badly? They didn't expect all those people to be there. The only thing, yeah, that's an interesting question.
Was already gone from the house. She was just back visiting, so she wasn't supposed to be there.
I wasn't expecting the other two to be up and there. The only theory I could come up with when I gave this thought is something like this. Now, this is just this part is really getting into the reeds of speculation, but just think about it a second. Let's say he's using his phone to survey in some way what's going on in that house. And we know that he has to put it in pilot mode. The night he decides to go in, he's got to shut it down. So let's say whatever app or device or camera, whatever he's using, is now off. Then it makes sense that somewhere between when he leaves the house and shuts that phone off and goes in there, he doesn't get the intel that somebody else has shown up. These other people have popped in there. They're awake. They're moving around. So what I think is he gets there and is completely caught off guard because that device or whatever it was had to be turned off. That's very suspicious to me, the putting the phone in pilot mode and then all of a sudden not knowing those people are there. Now, as Chris McDonough has pointed out to me many times, wouldn't he have looked at the cars outside?
Right.
Probably. So that's a little hole in that hypothesis. But something made his intel fail. And you can bet when he left the house that night, He thought that he was going to go in there and she was going to be by herself. Now, Chris's theory has always been, no, the whole house is the victim. It's a Bundy style sorority house thing and you want them all. So he's happy they're all there. But the evidence is a little confusing because it does seem to suggest going to a specific room, having a specific target, and just being mad at everybody else that were.
And there were two survivors, and there's two that, and
Right.
and one who said she saw him, and I don't know if he saw her, but she saw him on the way out.
Right. Well, you know, the other piece of this type of offender is this. Well, first of all, he would have been completely adrenally exhausted, you know, from killing 4 people. He even sat down and rested at one point before he left. But I also think there's this kind of being the arbiter of who lives and dies. And what's so infuriating about this case is that it turns out that he arbitrated that he lives. Right. In the end, right. He worked it out that he gets to probably be in some private cell, you know, writing letters and books and things, and lives.
So do you think he? And let's talk about the plea, right? That he admits it, right, and escapes the ultimate punishment. Do you think he was scared of that, or just exercising some level of control over his own fate?
Well, there's really very little indication that he was scared, even to don a mask, take a blade, go into a house in the middle of the night and kill a bunch of people, right? I mean, you know, scared doesn't really figure into it, which again is a sort of psychopathic trait, right? That fearlessness. And that's why I said, if you're pro-social and have some of that stuff going on, you can be fearless and do things that help, you know, the world, right? But let's let the jury decide if that's what's going on with his personality. But I think that well, how do I say this? I think that he was a complete control freak, and I think that when it came down to it, my sense is he was living this double life. And when the Dateline episode came out, and you know, I think the parents could no longer defend him in their minds. My guess is they realized they probably were going to have to testify. And I know Howard Blum has said that this is true, that they became concerned they had to testify. I don't know that for a fact, but my sense is the illusion fell away. There was no ability anymore to deny it. The guy's phone was photographed and shown on national television with these images. And I think they just sort of said to themselves, Brian, I think you got to kind of, you know, the jig is up. And I think that was a relief for him, because now he can enjoy this. He can be studied. He can, you know, and you can bet, based on this guy's personality, this is the kind of guy that's going to try to help. He's going to try to help law enforcement. He's going to say, I can give you insights into killers, you know, like he's Hannibal Lecter or something. In exchange for favors, you know, let me give you insights with my brilliant mind into crime. And but I think that part of the plea was a pathetic last gasp of control. And I found his detached mechanical quality in the courtroom actually kind of vaguely sadistic, because he didn't even look at the families. He was robotic. He couldn't care less. He couldn't even fake having the slightest bit of remorse. He didn't even dab a crocodile tear or anything. He just sort of said, yes.
Yes. Yeah. I did that on my show. I did a montage of him just saying yes. He's like the ultimate yes man. Let me ask you about this photograph. Your thoughts about this particular one, which was taken after the attack?
Well, remember Kohberger's writings online? He talked about that he would look in the mirror and he would see this pathetic loser. They would describe that he felt like a sack of meat, you know, nothingness. So here he's looking in the mirror and it's thumbs up. And what I think the point is, you know, think, for example, of the work of Al Carlisle, the psychologist Al Carlisle, who did some early work on serial killers and other kinds of offenders, wrote a few books out in Utah, by the way, first guy to study Bundy. He had this idea that these kind of people operate like someone who keeps falling off of a pedestal and then needing to get back on the pedestal through the killing, right? So you picture a person who's been knocked down, is feeling insecure, you know, whatever, And the idea is, now I've done this, I feel like a man, I'm reinflated, I'm back on the pedestal, you know, and he's got a spring in his step, right? Which is what people said about him after the date of the murders, that he looked like, you know, like the way a person looks after they've had a good date, you know, that kind of thing, where you've got a spring in your step and you're real happy and all that, right? So in some pathetic way, this guy kind of felt like he had become whatever it is he fantasized he was. And here he is finally looking in the mirror, instead of feeling like a loser, thumbs up. There's also, you know, it's also interesting that there's a very famous photo of Bundy doing exactly the same thing with the thumbs up, like that, which is actually a still from him leaving the courtroom, where he does the thumbs up, just like that. And it's this kind of idea like, I win, you know, I beat everyone. And don't forget, this is taken right around when he calls the parents. Remember that whole thing that he like makes a phone call home? You know, I mean, just think about that. I mean, you know, you've just killed 4 people. You just came home and wiped all the blood off yourself or whatever you do. And then you make a phone call home. You're proud of yourself. Sort of twisted stuff going on here.
Yeah. Well, how about him returning the following morning? What would motivate that? Is there a real cliche that, you know, they always return to the scene? This was kind of quickly afterwards, or was he kind of trying to check the status of what happened? Because and he must have been surprised that there was no crime scene tape, there were no police cars, there was nothing. It's as if nothing happened when he came back.
I think it's 2 things at the same time, like a lot of things with this guy. So you always want to think of somebody like this as having the practical level and the fantasy level, right? So from a practical level, I think he realized that he had left that sheath. I've always been very disturbed by the sheath, by the way, because one of the things I want to know is if it was a sheath that he wore on his belt. Right. The reason I want to know that is I want to know if when he was interrupted by Xana, he was loosening his belt. Because I do think there was a sexual component to this case, right?
Oh, wow.
So I was wondering if that's why it fell off. And I also thought it was fascinating that that's where there's DNA, because maybe I don't want to wear gloves during that. Right now, of course, that DNA could have come from before, even was in the house. But I wondered, maybe you want to take the gloves off because you want to fully experience what you're about to do, right? So I wondered about that. But so I think on a practical level, he's got to go back for that sheath to see if it's possible to get it. The second thing is, on the fantasy level, he must feel very powerful, because now you're watching the same way Son of Sam would, right? You sit back and you just watch the cops, the fire trucks, whatever, descending on the scene, and you feel kind of godlike because you're watching that descension of power, you know, that you've made it happen. And I think this is where you start picturing the control freak that just can't resist. In the same way that I think you would have gotten enjoyment from that, I think you would have also enjoyed watching all the press. And we know from the Dateline episode that he was watching loads of podcasts. I'm sure he was watching the profile that we did of him. Because when we did the profile, somebody in the audience said, he's going to be arrested in Pennsylvania. And that was weeks before the arrest, right? So either somebody involved in the investigation or him.
Right.
So that kind of person can't resist, because remember, if you are sexually inadequate, and I think he was, if you're sexually inadequate, you're going to assert domination and control through intellectual power, manipulation of the press and the public and the police, the narrative, watching the crime scene in this way, etc. And I think that's what you had, that kind of alien, detached intellectual curiosity about what I've made happen. The same way a scientist achieves gratification knowing I manipulated the independent variable and I made this thing happen. And now I'm, you know, because there's a scientific quality to this guy, right? Alien and detached.
So do you see him as very typical, almost cliche-like in what he's done and who he is, or does he have anything that separates him from others that you've seen and studied through the years?
Well, if we think of him as a fantasy-oriented, you know, psychosexually oriented offender, and I think he was, they break up pretty evenly into two buckets. The one bucket are the Ted Bundy types, which is what I think he aspired to be, but could never have been because he didn't have the cool, grooming, seductive quality Bundy had, right? And the other type is more of what might be called someone with schizoid autistic detachment. Now, that doesn't mean autism. It means that mechanical detachment where you could think of a person almost like a frog in a dissection tray. You're intellectually curious. You know, people like that, for example, when they commit torture, it's not so much about sadism as it is curiosity. What happens if I do this to a body? You know, if I apply electricity, what happens to them? What happens if I cut this part of you? Whatever. And we see some experimentation with him, for example, with Ethan, right? Some curiosity that was totally unnecessary. What I think is he falls into that second bucket, those weird mechanical detached people. Now, think, for example, of child abusers. In child abusers, if you're the grooming type, you basically form a bond with a child or a young or a preteen, you know, a pre-adult teen, and you work. You sort of try to work on them in terms of identifying some vulnerability. Oh, your parents are getting divorced. I'm going to talk you through it. I'm your coach. I care about you, whatever. And you break down barriers and you do. But if you are the second type, that sort of weird type, all you can do is snatch. You grab a kid in bed and run out the window, right? You open the car door and you grab the kid and you drive off and you do whatever you can do. So when you're profiling, one of the things you want to know is, did these people need to be awake? Did you have to talk to them? Did you have to have a conversation with them? Did you ever meet them at all? And when you look at Kohberger, there's no real interacting. They're asleep. He doesn't care if they're, you know, if they say one word to him, right? And so you go in the middle of the night, all that. So you start picturing a pathetic social loser. Well, all he's got is force. And of course, he doesn't have much of that. So he compensates with the knife and catching these people totally off guard. So what I think is he falls into that bucket. And offenders that fall into that bucket would be people like Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, would fall in there in that weird category. And the people that are in that weird category do very strange experimental things. When we look at their pornography choices, we see things that are really creepy. You know, necrophilia, cannibalism, body parts, things like that. And already, when the hints we have of his pornography is, you got to picture this guy. He's not looking at women that are having relations with men and enjoying that. He's looking at pornography where the woman has been drugged or forced into doing it, or she's basically, you know, looks like she's asleep.
Right.
So what does that tell you about this guy's choices, right? So that's why I think he falls into that bucket of weird, creepy, emotionless, not good at reading people kind of offender. Although he admired Bundy, he wishes he could have been that.
Right.
But he was no Bundy.
Let me ask you, how much could you learn about him by sitting down and speaking with his parents?
Well, now you're touching on something very important. I think that because there's a double life situation with this guy, what we want to understand is what did the life look like that was out in the open? What did they think he was strange from childhood? Did he have an interest in violence from the time he was a kid? Was he experimental with animals and other things when he was a small child? Was he spectrum-like? Right? Was he religiously preoccupied? Did he have a lot of guilt about even normal kind of sexuality? You know, did he have any friends at all? Did he get bullied? Was he a bully? You know, all this kind of stuff. So I think there's going to be a lot of information we're going to get from the parents. I'm less inclined to think that he would give very good information. I think he is going to try to paint a picture of himself as more successful and interesting. You know, much of the information he would provide would be absolute BS. You know, insights into why he did it, and like as if he's fascinating, you know, that kind of thing. But really, what it boils down to is the kind of a loser.
Right.
Not that interesting. Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about Elliot Roger.
Oh yes.
explain to us who he is and whether you believe there's any connection between this man that we're talking about today and Elliot Roger.
Well, Elliot Roger, who was the son of a man in the movie industry and raised by a woman that he found more interested in his brother than him, which figures into the psychology here, because you see this kind of Oedipal dynamic. The women like the other men better than me, you know, and dad doesn't care about me, kind of thing, right? He was this kind of self-identified, well, I guess you'd say he was an incel, right? He was a person that was he wrote a manifesto about, you know, how furious he was, that he was unnoticed, thought he was, you know, beautiful and interesting, and women didn't care about him, and he had a seething rage toward women and the men that they preferred. The famous story being, you know, he goes to a party and throws somebody off a balcony, and that kind of thing. He didn't try to hide that in any way. Now, because of this whole Papa Roger thing, you know, on the internet, there was this question of whether Kohberger was masquerading as that figure, and was insinuating himself into the online community about Kohberger, about whoever committed Idaho, that is to say. And the problem I have with that, and there are a few of them, one is that Kohberger actually doesn't meet the criteria for an incel. An incel is an involuntary celibate. That's a person who, no matter how hard they try, nobody's interested in them sexually. Kohberger had multiple people interested in him, but he ruined it by being weird. The Korean exchange student that he had no interest in, the woman that he goes on the date with, and he tells her she's got the nice birthing hips, you know, and he wants to tickle her, and others, right? Other stories about women that, you know, he gets the phone number of the woman who wants to go hiking with him, but he weirds her out, and then she stops answering him. There were people who were interested in him, at least vaguely in a friendly way, but in a couple of cases there was a potential romantic element. So he's not an incel. The second problem I have with it is Roger is nowhere on his phone. If you look at what we know about his downloads and what's on his phone, it's Bundy, Bundy, Bundy. There's no Elliot Roger there. That's an overblown hypothesis in my theory, in my feeling. Now, these ideas about Bundy and Roger are not mutually exclusive. He could have been interested in a lot of offenders. If that's true, the only way I can think of to reconcile it is that Bundy is who he wished he was, but Roger was closer to who he really was. That kind of thing. So I don't think they are mutually exclusive, but I do not think he's anything like Roger. Also, Roger was a spree killer. He targeted both males and females intentionally, whereas I think Kohberger had a specific female target, and the others just sort of happened unexpectedly, which is consistent with what the prosecutor said, that he had there to target one. So I think they're just very different people, but it's going to be interesting to see how the public, which of course has a craving to get closure on motive, is going to gravitate towards something like that. But I think it's a lot more complicated. The public struggles with stories where the only motivation is, I feel rejected, I don't know how to make people like me, so I'm going to enact a fantasy in which I take a woman by force, which has been fueled by violent pornography for a long time, and I want to experience firsthand what doing this feels like, because I've been studying it for a long time and talking to other offenders about it, and I could do it a little better than they can. I mean, the public doesn't get that.
Right.
They go groping for these simpler kind of explanations, you know. And but I think the Roger thing is just a little too simple.
The other part from the public's perspective, and I think part of why these cases capture our attention, and I go back to my own childhood. Like, I grew up, my first experience was Son of Sam. I'm living in New Jersey, and I'm like, I don't know how many, maybe I'm 10 years old, 12 years old tops, and I'm scared. Right, because it's someone that there's no connection, there's no control. It's randomly going to happen to us.
Right.
And to me, that's the fear. Is there anything that anyone could have seen or noticed to know that he was capable of this, or is it by definition, like you're not going to, because they keep it to themselves, that it's their own world working inside their own mind, that there's no way for us to know.
Well, this is a really important question. And incidentally, Son of Sam falls into the same category of offender where I would place Kohberger in my book, in The New Evil, if anybody's interested in that. So if you are that Bundy type, that grooming type, that type that can read people's feelings and manipulate them, there would be a lot less signs. If you are more that bizarre, schizoid, autistic type, you would have an explosive temper. You would be kind of paranoid and in this guy's case, misogynistic. And there would be signs that people should at least stay away from you, that you were odd and kind of hot-headed and said things that weirded people out. But there wouldn't have been anything overt that would have made anybody say that spills over into, this guy could kill me, right? So that what I think is that the people around him, his instructors and so forth, they probably said, look, this is an intense guy, but he's smart. He's got promise. If he applies this intellect in a pro-social way, he'll really help people, and then only when you look back, you go, he was pretty weird. Maybe I should have picked that up. But I think all of us who are teachers have had students like that, and you don't go wondering if they're going out killing people, right? I mean, I can't tell you. There's always going to be one or two like that. The student who says the creepy thing, who makes the misogynistic comments, who weirds the women out in the room, whatever. But, and the other thing is, look, if it wasn't a criminology program, his reading habits and what he was downloading and all that might have been weird. But everything is always cloaked in, maybe I was reading it because I'm a criminology student.
I'm studying it.
Right. Yeah, of course, we don't cosplay as the killers.
Yeah.
When I was studying it, I didn't don a hood, and make bad Brian, faces in the camera. But I think that that's where that boundary between fantasy and reality was collapsing for this guy. The other thing is that I think has probably been underplayed is I find it very hard to believe he was completely clean of heroin. I think that probably there was a little dabbling, in use, because even with Bundy, one of the things that would have made him identify is not only the pornography and the double life and all that, but the substance use. Remember, for Bundy would get bombed before he'd go kill. It was like the come on before going out and killing. So I wonder about that too. It is fascinating to me. There are people in the audience shouting Brian is innocent, but he has confessed, so he doesn't think he's innocent. Right. But okay. So anyway, but yes, I think that that's pretty much where he falls in the annals of crime, and I think now he's going to chat away.
Right. What do you expect at his sentencing? I mean, he'll have an opportunity. It's a sentencing. You have an opportunity to make a statement if you want. This will be presumably the last time he'll be on a public stage like this. This is the last opportunity, unless he's granted like an on-camera interview when, behind bars, and that's up to the Department of Corrections and all that. That may never happen. But he knows he's in a courtroom. He knows everyone's watching. He knows there's cameras in there, so the world can hear what he's going to say. Will he say anything other than be the yes man that he was last time?
Well, this is a really good question, because technically speaking, he doesn't have anything to lose.
Right.
And there is going to have to be a moment at some point. We saw it with Bundy in the courtroom, where that mask falls off and we see the rageful, angry person that's underneath. But we don't know when that'll happen. It could just be that, he's kind of defeated and has an idea of what's coming and all that, keeps his mouth shut. But I think that one of the reasons the autism diagnosis was important was that I think with all the different things it was helpful for, from the defense point of view, it also would have explained in advance some of what I think he was probably going to do in the courtroom, which is that anytime he felt out of control or there was something in the narrative that wasn't true in his opinion, he would have bristled and tried to correct it, because he couldn't control that. Even we know from school he couldn't control that, right? He's the kind of guy who would talk over the professor or snap at the other students or whatever. So you got to picture somebody who would have been going, excuse me, could I correct that? You know, so that I think it depends on if they say something to him, like, for example, the victim impact statements, that gets under his skin. And
Right.
then you might see it just a little bit. But otherwise, because he's a control freak, I think you'll see him not wanting to give them anything. And frankly, I don't think he has too much emotion about having killed or about the victims' families or anything like that. So unless they say something that slaughters his ego, right? You know, anything beyond, our lives, the things you would expect people to say, our lives have been destroyed. You're a monster. We hope you rot. That kind of thing. That unless they say something that really gets under the skin, I think he's just going to keep his mouth shut, look like a kind of a sphinx. But if they say something that gets under his skin, he may pop.
Well, I think that, I mean, I don't know what the families are going to say. I don't know what they'll be permitted to say. These things go down differently in different courtrooms. Sometimes judges permit someone to speak directly to the defendant. Most of the times they have to give their impact statements to the judge through the court. Sometimes they can talk about the defendant himself. Sometimes they're limited about just the impact that it's had. So I've seen it orchestrated differently in different jurisdictions and with different judges. So to me, that'll be interesting to see where the families are allowed to go in these statements, and whether they'll be pre-screened also. Sometimes they get pre-screened, and they have to be written. So there's a lot there.
I think they owe them one to let them get it off their chest, whatever they want in this case.
Absolutely. And it makes no difference, like, in terms of what's going to happen to the defendant. It's just, I've seen some judges kind of put the clamps on the victims, and it's difficult. It's difficult to watch, because then they feel like they're being victimized again, not having that moment, that opportunity.
Well, in my work, in my clinical work, because I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist, I work with a lot of people who have been victimized by crime, or families that have been victimized by crime, or family members. And one of the things I've learned is that the court process is like a kind of exposure therapy, where you're coming to grips with the reality of what happened to your family member, right? So you're buzzing around, you're talking to the news, you're keeping busy like a hummingbird that if you stop flying, you die, right? Because you don't want to sit still and go, the chair is empty, they're not here anymore. We don't need this stuff anymore because they're not coming back for it. Like, they're really gone, right? That moment, you want to avoid it. And what happens is you're in the courtroom for months and months and months. You're looking at crime scene photos. You're listening to the offender. And gradually your brain adjusts to the reality of it. And then you make your impact statement. It hits you. And then you can begin to pick up the pieces of whatever justice is. You move. But in this case, what happened is they got robbed of it.
Right.
It got pulled out they get an email that says he took a plea, so that it almost feels like Brian saying, gotcha. See? And you can just imagine how these people must be feeling. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out how a normal person would react to something like that. Some people's way of dealing with it is to say, I just want it done. Let him rot. I don't want to talk about it anymore. If we get to skip the trial, fine. And other people need it psychologically. And so I think that people got cheated. And so the least they could do is let people stick it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've spoken to so many people who have committed these heinous acts through the years.
Oh, God, yes.
So explain to us, if you could, the process for that. How do you get the access? What is the goal, and how difficult is it to get access?
Well, in my case, I'm doing forensic work, so the idea is that the access comes in the context of evaluating a person as part of the work that I do. So then, if you're talking about an infamous offender who's already, incarcerated, and I just want to study them, it's often as simple as developing a correspondence with them. And what happens is, I'll write to the individual, and I'll say, sometimes they write to me. They have access to my work, and then they'll contact me and they'll say, if you're interested I'd like to talk to you. And then I learn from them. And sometimes you can arrange a visit depending upon, the state. You can record or not record, but the idea is that it's not difficult to get access through mail. You're writing to people, corresponding. And these guys are basically just sitting there all day alone, and they're very happy to yap, to talk. Sometimes they tell you things that are outrageous. Some of them tell you lies. I've had people contact, very, very well-known offenders contact me because they were angry that they didn't like their rating in my book. That how they get copies of it, I have no idea. I mean, I'll give you an example. I one time just randomly got a letter from an offender in Oregon who told me that he wanted me to write about him because he thought that his case was interesting. And he told me in excruciating detail, I mean, I think it's like an 8-page letter, how he lured a small boy and fantasized for a long time about killing him with a box cutter, cut his throat, decided to let him just run around, not dead with the throat cut, enjoyed it, etc. And I never responded to that letter, but this is the kind of guy who wanted to enter into a kind of a connection where I could learn from him. There's that kind of person, that just loves to talk. And so think, for example, of the relationship between Catherine Ramsland and BTK.
Right,
where she corresponds. He sort of tests her psychologically to see if she could keep up with him intellectually. Remember, he was giving her like codes and to try to figure out. And then once won over, they have a correspondence that has lasted years. I mean, that's how it happens. And there are some people that I have communicated with that I am considering writing about. It's easier if the offender is no longer with us, because they are the owners of their writings and their artworks and things while they are alive. So if a person passes away, it's all yours, right? And so there is an offender that has died whose artwork and writings I'm thinking of publishing and writing about. But I do most of this stuff privately because I'm not looking to aggrandize these people. I'm learning about them to prevent other offenders. When we profiled Kohberger, we were able to do it in such a good way because we knew lots of other people just like him, of the same species,
right,
as this guy. So that's how we learn, and we know these ins and outs of how they operate. So, but it's a great question, and unfortunately, the general public figures out that they can contact these people, and then they wind up developing sometimes romantic relationships or.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen plenty of that.
Isn't that
they
creepy?
have these admirers, and then the people who, despite their guilty pleas, believe that they are innocent. And
well, Brian will get his admirers. No conjugal visits,
right?
But he'll get his admirers, and of course, the appeal of the person in prison is they'll never leave you. They'll never cheat on you. You always know where they are. You can vicariously be part of the fame, of the person. And it's like a perfect object, a perfect controlled relationship. You don't even have to have relations. It's just a perfect relationship, right? No cheating.
Do you think he's
out late at night?
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think how would you is there a sense of happiness or accomplishment, or do you think he's disappointed because he got caught, because it seems he made a horrific mistake in all of this?
I think his ego is bruised, and I think that he didn't get the opportunity he probably would have wanted to go out and do it better next time. But remember that with people who are motivated by psychosexual fantasy, the fantasy isn't going to go away. You just have to find other ways to play it out. So, like, for example, Jerry Brudos, the serial killer who was obsessed with shoes and feet, he kept a woman's foot in a refrigerator, and put shoes on it, took lots of photos of feet and the whole thing. When he was incarcerated, he worked it out that companies that made shoes were sending catalogs to the prison and would use those to arouse himself, right? In the days before photography and those kinds of mechanisms of fantasy, what do you think people did? They drew, like BTK does. You draw it out. In other words, one way or another, men are very visual. Their sexual fantasies are very, very visual. And if you take away, video pornography, they draw it, they imagine it, that's what testosterone does. It makes you very
Right.
good, right? So I think of Samuel Little, who could still picture his victims' faces in jewelry and clothing decades later. So what I think you have is a guy who has tucked away in his mind what he did, the victims' faces as they were dying, the screams, whatever he was experiencing, and he relives it in his mind and enjoys it.
Unbelievable. We're at like an hour here. I don't know what your day's like, but
I'm okay. I'm enjoying it. I okay. Maybe if you want to take questions, I'd be happy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I'm going to jump here into.
I haven't bored you yet.
No, not at all. But obviously, people have been having this amazing conversation. Let's see.
The dangers of asking me a question. I know too much about this stuff.
Right. Well, here's Amy. His entire family knew, especially when he came home. It was cleaning his car, cleaning out the trash, wearing gloves. They knew. What are your thoughts there about all that behavior when he returned to Pennsylvania? And we got to see a little glimpse of them when they got pulled over looking for Thai food in Indiana.
Well,
his dad.
Look, we've seen all kinds of cases. I mean, think of Brian Laundrie, right, where sometimes people know too much and keep their mouths shut. We have no reason to believe anything like that here. But this is more like what you see in a denial situation, right, where you get a glimpse, you're confused, but you sort of block it out, or you say, that's a little weird, but no, it can't be, couldn't possibly be, that kind of thing. But what happens in those situations is that at some point, it just like with anybody in our lives that we're in denial about, there's that moment where you just finally go, okay, I can't get around this. And you saw that, for example, with what they call pro-burgers, the pro-burger people who supported Kohberger vehemently. Even they, most of them, had a tipping point. And I found it to be that Dateline episode. I think once they started to realize that the guy was watching violent porn in which women were forced into sexual acts, it was a little hard to defend him. It's like that moment. But then you think about denial. It's so powerful. Look, for example, at the parents of Stefan Stearns.
I was just going to say, Stefan Stearns' parents gave that incredible interview, and Dad is convinced that he did it. Like, Dad is not.
Right. But you still support your kid.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So that desire to support it, you have to sort of take certain things and kind of put them here, in order to love somebody sometimes, and it's very hard for us to understand that process. So, but I think they had their suspicions, and I personally believe that they were on to these people, on to Kohberger, excuse me, even when he was making the cross-country drive.
Yeah,
I think they were
in the white Elantra that everyone.
I think they were already onto him. Yeah, the being pulled over a bunch of times and the whole thing. I can't help but think that they had their eye on him already. Yeah, he wasn't that good at getting away with anything.
This is from Shaker Maker. ER, Elliot Roger, wanted to go out in a blaze of glory and had a manifesto. Right. BK wanted to get away with his plan and do it again. Do you agree there?
I think that's a very good way to think about it. That for Roger, I mean, first of all, Kohberger would never kill himself, right? Too arrogant. Kohberger is more the type that, in imitation of Bundy, might come up with some idea about how to escape, rather than slipping justice by committing suicide. Then he would cheat himself out of all the attention and all the power that he could experience now. Yes, I agree 100%. Roger, it was like, if I can't have it, you can't have it. So I'm going to go out in a blaze. And that was not the Kohberger thing. Roger, just to give you an example of the psychology of Roger, I once interviewed a person. Now, I'm going to be very vague about this, of course, because I can't identify the person. But I once interviewed somebody who had been planning to jump in front of a train. And I said to the person, I'm always very interested in the mechanism by which a person tries to take their life. Why not a gun? Why not a noose? Why not poison? Why that? And he said, well, I was sitting on the platform and I was watching all these people, school bags on their backs going to school, holding kids' hands, taking them to school, sitting with their lover or their partner or their wife or husband, holding a bag like they were going to work, holding their lunch bag. And I was thinking, I don't have any of that. And if I jump in front of the train, they can't get there either. The train will stop in its tracks.
Wow.
And they'll have to get out and look at me, right? Well, there's a little of that to Roger, right? So the idea is if I can't have it, you can't have it. It's envy is the center of it, envy. So the fantasy for that kind of person is leveling the playing field, in a non-sexual way where it's just like, I have destroyed you because I had nothing, you have nothing. Kohberger's a totally different situation. Kohberger's idea is like, I have a fantasy and it's not enough anymore to just live it out in the shadows of my home looking at a computer screen. So now I need to actually play it out and feel it and do it. And that kind of person keeps doing it. And they have a long list of potential victims that they're trolling, or at least the type they're looking for. And they'll go on and on and on. And because it's like a person who says, I'm killing the same person over and over again in the same fantasy, but I'm getting it better each time, right? Think of George Lucas constantly changing the Star Wars movies until they're perfect, and then that's not good enough, and I change it again, like that. And not to make a crude comparison, but it's like that in the mind of this kind of offender. And so that's the difference. But it's a great question.
This is Vinita Sharma. He claims he is a vegan. While he wants to kill, people who are vegan usually are against killing. What do you think of the whole vegan aspect of his life?
Well, there's a few aspects to this. First of all, animals are much more predictable than humans. And I think to somebody with this kind of bizarre mechanical quality, he would have been drawn to relationships that were much more predictable. I think that's why he didn't kill the dog, for example. You like the idea of a relationship where something always feels a certain way about you, and what it's like a scientist. What do I need to do to make this thing happen? Well, with an animal, they always like me. Fine. It's people that are unpredictable. And this guy tried everything in the world to make people like him. Everything. Weight loss, being the smartest guy in the room, trying to be pro-social, whatever. Nothing worked until he finally decided he had to do it through force, right? So what I think is the vegan thing is about, first of all, it's a kind of a discipline thing, a losing weight thing, an identity, a sense of purpose, feeling, probably a respect for animals who are more predictable than people. But I he's a little bit of a health nut. It was in an effort to overcome substance use. It was all of that. But the other thing that's interesting psychologically about people with those double life phenomena is that sometimes you get this interesting thing where they are horrified by the very thing that excites them the most, right? So, for example, it reminds me of a killer that I talked to one time, an absolutely gruesome killer who for years had a terror of blood, the sight of blood, who would pass out if the doctor, had to draw blood, right? And so you start to think to yourself, maybe the reason it horrified you so much is because it excited you so much. You didn't like that you liked it so much, that kind of thing. So that with some of these people that are that clutch their pearls at the idea of violence and mutilation, and then go on to do it, you have to sort of wonder, it's like you doth protest too much, that kind of thing. And I think there's a little of that going on. But everything with this guy boils down to control. I think it was a mechanism of control. And there is no bashing of vegans. It's a lifestyle that I've often considered embracing myself. I'm a big animal lover, and so please, in the audience, don't take that the wrong way, what I'm saying. I just think that, just like you could have a person who's sincerely religious and a person that uses religion in an inappropriate way, you could have people that sincerely are vegan and people that are attracted to it for pathological reasons. So that is not a statement about all vegans. That would be a fallacy in logic to think that's what I'm saying.
LJ Forever, and I'm not quite sure what this is all referencing. You may know. His mom wrote a letter about TB death in paper. He must know. Thoughts.
Okay, so what this person is talking about is that.
And thank you, LJ Forever. Thank you.
Yeah. When Bundy was executed, Kohberger's mother wrote to the paper and said that she thought it was ghoulish that people were happy about his execution.
Oh, wow.
Right. There's a famous, I mean, if you Google it, you'll see there's a little article she wrote. She called it hearse chasing or something like that. She didn't like the idea that people were glorifying the execution of the offender. That's very interesting. You know, the idea that in this budding criminologist slash criminal psyche is the idea that his mother had a sympathy for, you know, this kind of perhaps Christian sympathy for a person who had done horrible things. And it makes you wonder if the idea is, I've got a double life. I'm worried that, you know, the few people in this world that love me would not be able to accept this, you know, and, you know, if there's any heinous offender, you know, mom had sympathy for, it was Bundy, you know, so it's kind of interesting when you think about him being drawn to that figure. But maybe it's a coincidence, but it is rather intriguing that the mother wrote that of all things, right, about the offender he goes on to admire.
Looks like you're blurred right now.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Hold on.
How did that happen? Let's see. I'm not. Let's see. Bingo.
Boy, fading. It's like maybe I need to shut the camera. It's like Back to the Future, you know. Hold on. No, I don't know what's going on there.
We're keeping you in witness protection now.
Yeah, right. I don't know about what's going on, but let me see if it. Anyway, I'm okay being blurred as long as the audience doesn't care. But any more questions? I'm happy to answer. Looks like people were really receptive to the talk today.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's just I'm listening to you and trying to read at the same time. So,
okay.
Here we go. Here's a New Jersey Elaine. Autism has nothing to do with the crime, but is part of his behaviors, as is his OCD for controlling behavior. He is just an evil person overall. What are your thoughts about? Let me start first with the word evil. Do you believe people are born evil?
Well, I wrote a whole book on it, so I have a lot to say about the subject. First of all, I'm very happy that this question was raised, because one of the things I want to make sure that I say is that autism is rarely associated with violence. Okay. When it is present, as it was, for example, in Elliot Roger, right? When it is present, at least that's been speculated. What you can see is that kind of mechanical detachment that can intensify what the person does in the room with the victim. But it is very rare, and it is really important not to pathologize as violent people that are on the autism spectrum. I work with them virtually every day of my life, and they are, you know, from a statistical perspective, virtually never violent in that way, like going out and harming somebody in the way Kohberger did. There may be some aggression in the home, particularly if overstimulated or not getting something they want or whatever, but not this kind of violence. So that's an excellent point. Now, regarding evil, it's important to understand that even the most egregious offenders, with maybe one or two exceptions I could think of, are not day in and day out doing acts that would be called evil. Most of them have lives where at least somebody likes them, and they're functioning in some way, and then they're doing things that meet the characteristics of evil sometimes. And the word evil is very interesting because it comes from the Germanic ubu, which means beyond or extra. And right at the heart of this idea of evil is things that you're doing that are not necessary practically for the crime. So when the public uses the word evil, when they go groping for a supernatural explanation, it's because they're seeing things that they can't relate to because there's no human-like motive anymore in the offense. So if, for example, somebody walks in on their wife or husband of 25 years in bed with their best friend and picks up an object and bashes one of them over the head and kills them or both of them, a jury kind of understands that. There's a human element to that. There are going to be people in the audience that might say, under the right circumstances, I could kind of see myself flipping out like that. I have to be honest, that kind of thing, right? And then you when you're dealing with crimes that are more likely to evoke the word evil, it's because the person does something totally beyond the practical stuff that you need to do to commit the crime. So I'll give you an example. There was an offender years ago called Gary Christ. He was a physician, believe it or not. And being a psychopath, he decided that he was going to kidnap for money this friend of the Nixon family called Barbara Jane Mackle, who was in her hotel room recovering from the flu with her mother.
Are we talking about the Nixon family, like Richard Nixon?
The Nixon family,
okay.
Yes. And he shows up with a mask on, the robbery thing, the whole thing with this woman, a female accomplice, and they kidnap this woman. Okay. Now, there's a ransom situation. Okay. Now, practically, it's financial, the whole thing. Okay. But just for fun, the evil part, the part that's extra, is that to enjoy his, sadistic thrills, he creates a coffin with an air tube and buries her alive, with the tube traveling up to the soil above, right? So that she has to pull air through it in the pitch dark of the box, with a little note that says, they'll be here for you around Christmas time. Feminine products are in the box, a little bit of what you might need to survive in this coffin. And she's basically trapped in there in the darkness, right? Now, this was not necessary for the kidnap and the ransom. It was just done for his amusement. And that's why it leads people to say he's evil.
Right.
So that word, one of the things that's so at the heart of that, and I write about this in The New Evil, is that stuff that goes beyond what is necessary for the crime. And that's when you're motivated by fantasy and personality. And if that's your motive, like Kohberger, you have no reason to stop. That's why we use the word evil for Kohberger. The other characteristics of evil acts, of course, are that anybody would think they were horrible. There isn't going to be any arbitrating, over whether this is bad, right? They're universally seen that way. And they impart a kind of excessive suffering, right? And they're bewildering to the public. We just can't understand the motive. And I think you'll see, breaking it down the way Michael Stone and I did in this book, that as a consequence of thinking in that way, you see that some acts are more evil than others. And the higher you are on that scale, the more likely you are to keep offending, because you're motivated so purely by personality and fantasy. That's why the original purpose of the scale was courtroom work, to make a jury understand. You could let this guy out if you want to, but look how he's motivated.
Right.
He'll do it again, right? And let me tell you, if I had the opportunity, I would have said that about Kohberger. Go ahead, let him out.
See what happens.
And let's wait a few months. Right. So what is your podcast called?
This is from Corn Pope. Dr. Gary Brucato, what is your podcast called where you did the profile? Do you have a channel?
Oh, okay. I personally don't have a true crime channel, but I appear very often on the Interview Room, which is the channel for the Cold Case Foundation, basically. And if you go on YouTube and you just look like Brucato profile Interview Room, it comes up right away. They took my pieces of the episode and strung them together, so it just looks like, an hour of yapping. But if you watch the full episode, you'll see that there are additional points that are made by everybody. But I have to tell you, watching it back, it's pretty eerie. I mean, it's like we knew it. It's really, really scary. I mean, there isn't even a point of it where I go, boy, were we wrong. It's just like, it's really weird, to watch it back. But I guess we've been doing this too long. But it's easy to find on the Interview Room. Take a look at it.
Aaron N., is narcissism involved with his profiling? Sorry if I've missed that part.
Well, in the way that Michael Stone and I conceptualize some of these cluster B personality traits, we put them on a spectrum. So we see narcissism followed by being a psychopath, followed by sadism, which isn't a personality disorder anymore, right? In the DSM, they took it out because it was being abused as a defense. My client suffers from sadistic personality disorder. He was beating up his wife because he's got sadistic personality disorder, right? So it's no longer diagnosed. So, but by putting it on a spectrum, then you say, all sadistic people are psychopathic and narcissistic. All psychopaths are narcissistic, but not all narcissists are psychopathic and or sadistic. So, of course, given that he has qualities that sort of go in that psychopathic place on the scale, you can assume there has to also be a narcissistic core where you're attention seeking and you're angry that people aren't paying attention to. Whenever you deal with a narcissistic person, the clue of it is that the people around them get kind of divided up into people that like ferociously defend them and people that hate their guts, right? So you look for that division in the public and you know you're dealing with a narcissist. That's just basically how it works. And so you get sycophants that will do anything to defend you, and then you get the ones who go out and say, I don't know what you're looking at, this is a monster. And that can divide juries. That can divide juries incredibly. He's a victim. No, he's a monster. He's a victim. Right. We see it in the chat today.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So it's a clue of that personality structure. So, okay, you're getting lots of compliments to you, Vinnie, in the audience there.
There you go. And from our friend at Grizzly True Crime, Gisela, the Zizians are also vegans.
Yeah.
Do you know about the Zizians?
Well, I don't know too much about them. I do know that channel, which I've enjoyed watching many times. But no, maybe I'd like to hear a little bit more about it. I like to learn about anything that's off the beaten path.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about the Zizians, but I would be afraid that I would misspeak here. But I believe it's a cult-like group, and they have some interesting background. But I don't want to make the mistake. I've read about it, but we haven't covered it yet on my show, and I think we should. Thanks so much, Grizzly.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating group. Do you do much studying of cults?
Well, of course. I mean, we have a lot about it in New Evil also, and I'm very interested in cults because one of the teaching points I've used over the years in talking about cults is that a cult, in my opinion, is basically a large-scale abusive relationship. The mechanisms that are used in a cult are exactly the same as what an individual would use who was trying to control, love bomb, manipulate, etc. An individual person, and so you can see how the same kind of personality structure in an abuser is present in a cult leader. But cults are getting very popular because of this existential void that a lot of us are in this culture, where we're looking for replacements for a lot of traditional ideas and things that we're seeing fall in the contemporary world. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying that's a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing.
Having those things fall, people they have a need for this kind of identity. I think that's partly what you saw with Kohberger with the vegan thing. Right. You need to have something to belong to. And that's why with the mass murderers, losing that one thing is such an activating event for them. Because if your whole life is, my romantic partner, my school, my work, my whatever, and you lose it, your whole identity collapses. It's not like, 100 years ago where the average person would say, well, I'll fall back on my faith.
Right.
Back on, on certain cultural ideas that will, what you're seeing, and this is a big part of what's in the New Evil also, is this corrosion of the inhibitions and personality strengths of the average person. So that you're seeing that crime is changing, becoming more horrifying, and things that would have been like page 1 news 50 years ago are now like page 18 in the newspaper. They're garden variety.
That is so incredibly true.
Right, because they're
so incredibly true.
Sensitized, and the technology added to it is like the perfect soup.
Yeah.
So that's what New Evil is, right? That's what we mean by the term. It's the changes, the cultural changes and technological changes, making crime different. So,
New Jersey Elaine, thank you, Vinnie, for having such a brilliant mind on, and Dr. Brucato, so appreciate your insight on this case. Love your book. There you go, getting some love.
Thank you. It did very well. Many times it becomes the #1 bestseller in forensic psychology on Amazon, and whenever I do an appearance like this, I see jolts of the sales, and and I really, really appreciate that. But you can get it anywhere. Barnes and Noble has it, and all the main bookstores. But I'm working on 2 more, so
Two
there'll be a
more.
lot
Okay.
to read. Yes, one is a book with the foundation. So, and the other book is like a sort of well, I won't get into it, but it's sort of a follow-up to the New Evil.
Ashley Bouchard, one of our moderators over on Facebook. Do you think people are born evil or learn evil?
Okay, well, here's the question that would win me.
Is that another hour?
No, I mean, it could be, but
Could be. I know, right?
Stop me. But let me give you the short answer to this. It depends on the kind of evil you're doing. If you're somebody very low on the scale that Michael and I talk about, chances are you're acting out of circumstance. So you think, for example, of the old poem by Auden that says, I know what all school children learn, those to whom evil is done do evil in return, right? That kind of idea. But then when you get higher up in the scale where people are psychopaths, the jury is out on those people. And I think there's a combination of factors. I think some of it is inborn. You have a certain kind of brain that is not afraid and is bored all the time and lacks a kind of compassion, right? But if you're treated well by the world, you might use that in a pro-social way. If you're treated badly by the world, you may apply it in a horrendous way. That's why a lot of these offenders, for a period in their life, are drawn to things where they would have to do very heroic things. But they wind up getting twisted in the other direction. So I think it depends on the type of evil that you're talking about. And there's no question in my mind, for example, that a child molester has a brain that is warped.
Right.
That looks at a child and sees cues for sexual attraction that a normal person wouldn't. Things like that. So there's some biological aspect. That doesn't mean they're victims, that they have to be pitied or something.
But it's an explanation, not an excuse. That's the way I look at it.
You got it. So you still have to inhibit yourself.
Right. Stars align. Thank you so much for the super chat. And
Sports Vinnie, I think that's awesome. It's a good guy.
I think we missed. There's one of our regular. Where is it? It slipped past me. Oh, here we go. All right, you ready? Mick Spunky, Uncle Spunky, reporting for duty. Thank you, Mick Spunky. He's one of our regulars, and I'll treat you to this, Dr. Gary Brucato, because you're here. It's just part of the show. Mick Spunky, he's like an intermezzo for us when we get into some deep, difficult places. I like to have Mick Spunky come in. He's got the smile. He's got the attitude. Everybody loves Mick Spunky. And it's like a cleansing moment.
He fixed it.
Yeah, and he fixed the blurriness. See, yeah, exactly. He does so many things. Which is why we have the Mick Spunky theme song.
Time to get happy. It's time to get funky. It's time for us to smile. Because here comes Mick Spunky.
There you go. Thank you, Mick Spunky. He makes us smile all the time.
As long as I don't get a theme song.
Welcome to my madness. All right. So this has been amazing, Dr. Gary Brucato. You giving us so much time, so much insight.
Of course.
Obviously, folks, go out, if you haven't read the book, get the book. You got to read the book at this point. But it's so great. And I appreciate so much time that you give us on my show at night on Court TV. Bring us your expertise and insight. And I'm glad we got to have a much deeper conversation tonight because we had the ability to not have to go to a break for a commercial and all the other things that happen on television. So,
and I will talk to some of my colleagues who might be interested in appearing also.
Yeah, absolutely. This worked out really, really well. Dr. Gary Brucato, thank you so much, sir.
You are so welcome. Take care, everyone.
Well, this is the part of what you're going to miss. I'm just going to tell you what you're going to miss. So unless you want to stick around for it. I'm type 1 diabetic. So at the end of each program, people have to guess my current blood sugar.
Oh. That's interesting.
And then, we give out prizes at the end of each quarter. But so there's some of that stuff involved. I don't think you need to be here for that. I know it gets a little silly, but it's just something we do here on the program. Do you want to venture a guess as to what you believe my blood sugar is at this moment?
No, I don't want to venture a guess. Let me leave that up to the audience. But I think it's really great that you're drawing attention to the importance of diabetes awareness, so forth. Because let me tell you, there are people walking around, particularly with type 2, who have no idea that they have it. And they're just waiting. I have a health condition that that has aspects that overlap quite a lot with diabetes. So I'm very sensitive to that, and I think that that's really, really great. And also, my co-author on The New Evil suffered for many years from diabetes and was very, very big on diabetes awareness.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean,
really
I've been very public about it, for a couple of reasons. One reason is so people understand it, but the other thing is don't be scared of it. Like the thing that I love about diabetes, about having diabetes, not that there's anything you can love about, is that you do have some sense of, and we were talking about this with Mr. BK, control. So when you have diabetes, you can control it. It doesn't necessarily have to control you. So
exactly, and I think that's it's just really great that you're drawing attention to it, because a lot of times people just ignore their health or ignore their diet, ignore exercise, so forth. And diabetes is just such a pandemic situation.
Yeah, no, it's everywhere. I mean, type 1, there's not quite as many of us, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing's going to happen to you if you don't take care of yourself. So
that's right. And
Dr. Gary Brucato
and all that. Yeah. So, all right, take care of yourself.
Thank you so much.
If you need me. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, Dr. Gary Brucato, the first guest ever, ladies and gentlemen. I've never had a guest before. What a great guest. Wasn't that amazing? An amazing time. Incredible insight. If I didn't get to your question, obviously there were tons of questions, so I couldn't get to all of them. And trying to speak and listen to him and read the comments so I get to questions was a little bit of a challenge. So I may come up with a different way to do that next time we have a great guest like this on. But thank you so much. All right, I'm trying to see. So Gringa has gifted One Court TV membership. I don't know how to pop that up on the screen. But by the way, we're live on my Facebook, on my YouTube channel. We are also live on Twitch, on X, and on the Court TV YouTube channel today for a great simulcast. All right, now I've got to go back in and make sure I don't like to miss any of the supers. Gringa, thank you, Gringa. Let me make sure we get yours. Music by Brian. Why do so many want to go to bat for him and others like him, even after he's pleaded guilty? Music by Brian 2024. That's a great question. Some people like to be contrarians. I think our system of justice in a case that has not been fully litigated, right? Where we don't have the conclusion. I think a sense of skepticism is good, is healthy, that not just taking the government at their word, but here you're not taking the government at their word. You're not taking the defendant at his word either. So I don't know why people are going to bat for him. That's a little bit baffling to me. But I think we'll always have some contrarians out there for whatever reason. But at this point, he is admitting what he did. So it's not even a jury saying it and saying the jury got it wrong. What you're saying is that he's admitting to a horrific event that he did not do. And here's Gringa gifting One Court TV membership. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you're watching on one of my channels, make sure that you subscribe to the Court TV YouTube channel. And they also have a membership program over there with lots of great perks. So that's awesome. All right. So I think I got to all the supers. If I missed your super, I do apologize. So now the other thing we're going to do I see some guesses that are out there already, but the song has not been played. So you're going to have to redo those numbers. So if you've made any guesses of the blood sugar at this point, they have not counted because it doesn't count until I start the music. It's like playing musical chairs. All right, so it's time for all y'all to guess my blood sugar.
The type 1, he's type 1. His pancreas is on first. He has diabetes, type 1 juvenile diabetes. And so it's time to guess, is more or less. What's his blood sugar? What's Vinnie's blood sugar? Under 70, he gets like 10. Under 60, all the alarms start ringing. Over 180, he starts to get lethargic. But when it's 90, Vinnie, eyes are singing. And so it's time to guess, is more or less. What's his blood sugar? What's Vinnie's blood sugar? But take a guess. Yes, take a guess. Let's guess Vinnie's blood sugar now.
All right. Congratulations to J.D. Weimar. And again, 128. Thank you so much. So you will now qualify to be a winner this quarter, J.D. So I don't know where my list is of this quarter's winners. Got to find it. Here it is. Okay. There we go. Is this right? Yeah. All right. JD, what's the date? 7/16, 128. You're on the list. Got a bunch of people on the list. All right. Thank you so much, JD. And, oh, by the way, a big thanks to our mod squad today, doing an incredible job as always. I've got a, this was a different kind of, here we go.
Order in the chat. Order in the chat. Don't dare attack. We've got order in this chat. The mod squad is on the job, helping us to keep it clean. The mod squad is on the job, always so nice and never mean.
And a big thank you to Gen X, Frankie Figs, Jennifer Soubey, and Ashley Bouchard, our incredible mod squad, keeping law and order in the chat today and every day. Thank you so, so much. And finally, one more item of interest here. Don't forget, we've got incredible merchandise available in the Vinnie Originale True Crime merch shop.
Hey everybody, hey everybody, I've got something for your body, for your body. You can wear it by yourself or with Frankie Valli. It's true crime merch from Vinnie Originale. It's true crime merch. It's true crime merch. It's true crime merch from Vinnie Originale. From Vinnie Originale.
Oh, yes. You are going to love the true crime merch that's available. Really does make a great Christmas gift. Okay, so thank you all for watching. Thank you for playing the game. Yeah, it was a different kind of Vinnie Live today, but I thought it was great. Maybe we'll have more guests in the future. Oh, now I'm blurry. Wasn't that great when he went blurry for like 5 minutes? That was amazing. Yes, Dolores, the Vinnie Originale True Crime merch shop. Yes, and I've been trying to get in there to add some new merch and some new designs that we have. Some of the mods are doing some designs as well. The weekend that I set to do it, my computer was on the fritz and I had to bring it into the shop on Saturday. I didn't get it back till Monday. And that was my little window of time. So I'll get back in there, but we have great stuff anyway. Thank you so much. All right. So that's it. Thank you everyone for watching on the Court TV, YouTube, on X, on my Twitch, on my YouTube, and of course on Facebook. Don't forget, you can watch me tonight, 8 to 9, closing arguments with Vinnie Politan, then 9 to 10, Vinnie Politan investigates, 2 hours, live true crime, only guy in the business doing it day in and day out, night after night, day after day. And what else? Got some vacation time coming up, but I'll try to pop up from vacation with some, fun videos for y'all. That's it for today, folks. That's all I have. Just got to line up the next song, and then we're out of here. Wait, no, do I have it? Where do I have it? I have it right here. All right. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
Say goodbye. Thank you for watching Vinnie live. We'll be back, but I don't know when. We hope that you will watch again. Vinnie live. It's Vinnie live. Whoa, it's Vinnie live. To our awesome mosh. Thank you for those super chats. Please hit the like and do subscribe. Let's do it again on Vinnie Live. Now before you go, just one more thing. Please post below, say anything. Before you go, just one more thing. Please post below, say anything.